They're dead, Dave.
What, Captain Hollister?
Everybody's dead, Dave.
What, Todd Hunter? What, Selby? Not Jen.
He's dead, Dave. Everybody is dead. Everybody is dead, Dave.
Hello, welcome to Everybody is Dead Dave, the Red Dwarf review podcast where we're making our way through every episode from the end to the beginning and beyond. If you know the show, you know what I mean by that. It sounds the wrong way round, but it's not. We are up to series 4. We're cracking through these now. We're up to the episode Camille. It's, as usual, myself, Phil Hawkins, the long-time Red Dwarf fan, and Adam.
Yes, hello, the new Red Dwarf fan who is making his way through the show for the very first time and having a lot of fun doing it.
And once again, this series, we're getting a couple of guests on, and our guest reviewer today is Council of Geeks. Well, Nathanial from Council of Geeks. Hello.
Hey there.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. There aren't enough hours in the day, but other than that, and that's not a new problem. So, you know.
Now, I knew we had to get you on because the YouTube algorithm, in all its wisdom, managed to pop up on my feed an old video, which I had watched several years ago when you first made it, and I'd just completely forgotten about. But for some reason, probably because I'm putting these out every week on my YouTube channel, and it spotted that and going, oh, you like Red Dwarf. It brought up an old video of yours about Red Dwarfs. So what's your history with the show?
So I found the show sort of through a friend. I found the show in middle school. I'm trying to think of the shortest way to explain this because I could get into stupid amounts of detail. So Red Dwarf aired on public television in the U.S., which is also how a lot of people in the U.S. first saw classic Doctor Who. So I didn't actually have that in my own house. I actually didn't have television coming into my house at all. My mother absolutely hated it. We had a VHS, we had videos, we rented movies all the time, but she hated actual television. She hated the ads, she hated the news. So I never actually had TV, but I had a friend who he had taped off of public television a couple of episodes from series 2, I believe. And I saw those and then I'm like, okay, well, these are awesome. And then I just went out of my way to find all the stuff from the show after that. And I've been keeping up as best as I could.
Well, the other reason, when I saw this video come up, that you'd done that video about Red Dwarf, so I knew you were a Red Dwarf fan. The other reason I had to get you on was because you might notice something slightly familiar about the format of this podcast.
It's aside from the bringing on of guests, it's basically the same format as What the Frell, which I do with Jessie Gender about Farscape, where
Exactly.
I'm the one who is rewatching and she's the one who is seeing it for the first time.
And I do have to fess up, it was completely inspired by your podcast. I'm a regular listener to What the Frell. And so when I had that in the back of my mind, I've been listening to What the Frell, and then Adam on one of his videos mentioned that he hadn't seen Red Dwarf. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I could do what Jessie and Council of Geeks are doing with Adam for Red Dwarf. That's a great idea. So that's how this podcast was born. Thanks in part to you.
Well, you're welcome. Like, honestly, it's a really fun format to do. I mean, it's a great excuse to rewatch something, but also like to get to talk about it immediately after, because it can be hard for me to get into rewatches just like in a bubble. But like if I can expose somebody new to it, it reinvigorates the rewatch.
I know what you mean. Yeah. You need something that, and for me, what rewatching Farscape was your podcast. I'd been meaning to rewatch Farscape for about 4 years, and it just kept on getting pushed down the queue and not getting around to watching it. And then you guys started your podcast, and I was like, oh, okay, now I'm going to start rewatching it. So sometimes you just need that something to push you to do it, don't you?
Yeah, I can do it.
And we actually also, in a couple of weeks' time, we will be having Jessie on as well. So we're getting both the What's the Frell people on the podcast.
As long as I'm on first, then like we.
Oh no! What have I done?
I can lord that over her, and I'm fine with that.
So the episode of Red Dwarf that we're talking about today is Camille, the first episode of series 4, in which Rimmer and Kryten rescue Camille, a female android from a passenger ship that has crash-landed. Kryten falls in love with her, only to learn Camille is not who she appears to be. Let's just start at the very beginning. The intro is new clips in the intro. You, Adam, mentioned last series that this new intro was, seeing the clips and stuff was a bit different to the first 2 series.
Yeah, it is nice. It's obviously getting like previews of what's to come, but I must admit I still have that little affinity for the first 2 series intros where it's the panning shot of the ship and like the slower building version of the theme. The theme we've got now is great and the intro is great, but I don't know, there's still something about that first intro that's still maybe it's because it's the first one I've seen technically, but yeah, I don't know, I kind of like it.
Do you have a preference?
Here's the funny thing with me with this thing, because probably because it is assumed that Americans have no patience. When I was able to get a hold of those first 2 series, the versions I could get here in the States had opening credits and the theme for the first and second series done in the style of series 3 and on.
Oh, that's interesting.
I actually didn't see the slow build pan opening until I bought them on DVD when I think I was in college, first time I started getting those. So I didn't experience that for a while. So that was actually the one that threw me off because I had no nostalgia for it. And I'm like, whoa, that's a slow open. That's weird.
Do you have a preference of eras of the show?
I mean, I'm very nostalgic for the first 2 series, but I mean, that's a lot of that has to do with those were the first ones I managed to get tapes of, and I've seen those episodes more than any other. I rewatched them over and over and over and over again. So just it's probably the first 2 series, but I immediately put the asterisks on. It's not because they're better; it's because I have more nostalgia for them, and I do recognize the difference.
Yeah.
Sure.
Adam, in this intro thing, is there anything, because obviously they're clips from the upcoming season, was there anything that caught your eye and you're like, oh, I want to know?
From what I remember in the clips, I think there was one where there was, it looked like there was 3 Krytens or like a multiple thing going on. There was one with, well, I think we saw it in this episode. Nathaniel is like, this Phil has to do this all the time.
I was laughing because you said Krytens, which is Farscape again. We've got all this bleed over.
The crossover. I like all the clips seen. It's tricky because obviously like when we do this normally, I might pick up on things that Phil knows is coming later, and he's like, you might see that again, but he can't talk about it because it's
spoilers.
A spoiler. So, yeah, but yeah, it's just as interesting as the Series 3 one. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what else happens.
Interesting tidbit I found out about this episode. It was first broadcast on Valentine's Day, which seems very fitting for the episode.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's cute.
I was just in the little IMDb trivia section.
Oh, so that means it's definitely 100% true.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sure it's absolutely
slightly more accurate than Wikipedia.
Accurate.
So.
It's actually really not. You need no credentials to add. I can add trivia onto IMDb. I can't add stuff onto Wikipedia. They would vet me out of the process. But I can and do put information on IMDb. I put accurate, but it's a low bar.
I remember every time for Wikipedia, every time I tried to add something, somebody would edit it out again within 5 seconds.
Oh God, just a rat race, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, maybe it was out on Valentine's Day though. I like to think it is true though, because that fits quite nicely.
It's a nice enough idea. I will choose to accept that as canon.
Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah. So, what any opening thoughts on the sort of opening bits of it?
Well, I had. It's been a little while since I watched this, so I'd forgotten that this is the episode that opens with the lying lessons between Dave and Kryten, and that's just so much fun. with just Kryten so in awe of Lister's ability to hold up a banana and say it's a female aardvark.
It's easy. Look, an orange, a melon, a female aardvark.
Oh, that is just so superb, sir. How do you do that? Especially calling a banana an aardvark. An aardvark isn't even a fruit. It's total genius.
And then when he manages it, like, it goes on for quite a while. Actually, that's a good point, Adam. I know you don't like how long some of the gut jokes go on for.
I was
in Red Dwarf.
waiting.
What about this one?
I might not mention it. I was like, I might see if you met, and you mentioned it straight away. For anyone who's just joining the podcast, and for you as well, Nathaniel, it's become a recurring thing where some of the longer jokes, shall we say, I don't take as well to, and I know that's the stereotype of, oh, you're a young man of the current generation. Your attention span is so short. But I am watching it. I just think some of the jokes personally go on a bit too long. This one, for me, there was a point where I thought, ooh, are we crossing it? But I think the way the actors perform it, and they even though it's the same recurring joke, like, what's this? Oh, it's a banana. No, you've got to lie. Even though it's the same joke, I feel the two actors differentiate it enough to keep it interesting. So I actually didn't think this one was too long, in all honesty, for that reason.
Well, I think part of the thing about this bit is that it does reverse back on itself at some point. So, yet the core joke of it doesn't really change. But as a bit, first, Kryten just can't do it. And then as they go along, he manages to do it. He's got this so much enthusiasm. He's all excited. And then suddenly he can't do it again. So, it flips back around and takes it right back. And his disappointment, where he's just all excited, is like, it's a banana. Yes. So it has a rhythm that keeps it from getting boring, which is the way to counteract something where the punchline is repetitive. If you can vary up the rhythm of the gag, you can still keep it fresh.
And it does that also with when he's successful. He doesn't just lie in a simple way like, oh, this is an aardvark. He has these really elaborate, like, this is a Czechoslovakian traffic warden, or it's these really long things that it's almost like that's the only way he can lie, is to make it a really elaborate, ridiculous lie, which also kind of adds to that feeling. I quite like that.
No, I was happy with it. Yeah, so for once, Phil, if you were trying to catch me out there, it didn't work this time, because I enjoyed a long joke. Hope long may that continue. So...
Best time for everything. There was an interesting kind of moral discussion around it as well that kind of got brought up, of when it's noble to lie. That was what he was trying to teach him, in a way that it can be good to lie sometimes, to save someone's feelings, and that's kind of the gist of the episode, in a way, because that we'll come to it later, but that's kind of how the episode ends as well. Any thoughts on that? Because you said the first two seasons, Nathaniel, were kind of your favourite. One thing I noticed in this rewatch, which I hadn't quite clocked, even though I'd seen them all before, is that those first two series are very much more kind of have a sort of message to the episodes. And then later on, certainly this series 3, I noticed, and this one, there's sometimes still there, but it's less. It's less about the message and more about the action adventure.
There is a lot more integrated theme work in the first few series, which is probably largely out of necessity because they didn't have the budget to do anything like they did in series 3 and on. But I'm always kind of attracted to strong theming, and in general, I always appreciate anything that can do a take on something that has some nuance in it, because I'm not saying absolutely everything is this black and white, but the standard thing is lying is bad, don't lie. It's and I will always appreciate anything that can take something that is frequently presented as a black and white thing, and allow for there to be some nuance, even in a fairly truncated way like this is. Because usually the closest most things get is you'll have the hero lie, but it's still portrayed as a bad thing, and they get found out, and there's a misunderstanding, blah, whatever. It's very, very rare for a lie to be shown to have any nobility. So it's nice to see it, acknowledged by Lister that it, there's precedent for it and citing examples of it, and then allowing the story to then go there itself.
Yeah. Adam, any thoughts?
No,
on
just
that?
on the similar lines, like you say, that whole the liar revealed, as I think it's called, is such a common, in anything, whether it's comedy, drama, it's such a common trope because it can work, but yeah, it's just nice to see, like you were saying, Nathaniel, and like you were saying, Phil, about the messaging of it. Just I guess this thing of lying nobly, I guess, or to I guess in a way protect someone else, or whether that's the right thing or not, whatever. But yeah, it's just nice to see a different spin on it, because I must admit, when that opening joke came in about lying, and you think, right, is this going to be a recurring thing? I did hope it wasn't going to be a liar revealed story sort of thing, and it wasn't. So yeah.
Yeah, they really did manage to wrap it throughout the episode quite well, I thought. And in fact, it even surprised me, because at one point I couldn't remember how it ended, and at one point I had in my head, I think this is going this way, and it actually didn't. It went a slightly different way. There were similarities, but it did surprise me at the end, which was quite good as well. Especially when it's an episode you've rewatched several times over 20 or 30 years, that to be able to still surprise you is quite good, I suppose. Yeah. Although I haven't watched this particular episode in probably over a decade.
Stop making me feel old.
No, it's all right. I frequently do it to Phil on this.
Well, by
show.
mentioning how
there'll
long
be a
it's
reference
been.
in it. Well, there'll be a reference in an episode to like I guess a person who was popular or well known at the time, and I'll be like, who's this? And Phil will be like, oh my god.
I would do that too, but only because it's British pop culture that I'm not as plugged into. So
that's
you
true.
Can
There's
team
probably
up with
a lot
me
of
then.
stuff.
We can really nail it to Phil this stuff. Well, there was. I know I'm jumping ahead a bit, but who's Carl Malden?
I don't know.
I know the name. I'm actually.
It was the line, I think, where they were talking about, I think, the creature being, ugly or whatever, and I think Kryten or someone says, oh, it could be worse. At least you're not Carl Malden. And I was like, who's that?
Like, the thing is, Carl Malden wasn't even a topical reference at the time.
Right.
Like, he was already like a super old actor.
Isn't he? It was a black and white actor.
That was kind of his
quick Google search is to be believed.
That was kind of his heyday. Yeah, he was in stuff like Patton and Gypsy and On the Waterfront. Like, it was a really odd pull. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's slightly consistent internally in terms of, like, if Lister's showing him things like Casablanca and that era of movies, I guess it tracks, but it's a weird name to pull even at the time.
I was a bit like, okay, who's that?
Yes, that's one reference that even us oldies didn't necessarily get straight away. I didn't. But I have had to explain several things to you. I don't know which ones of them translated to the US anyway, but did you have Shake and Vac in the US?
No.
See
that's like, I watch enough British stuff that, like, I'm used to just accepting, like, that's a reference I don't get and moving on. Like, I'm not one of those people like, I must look up what it means. I'm like, it went over my head. I accept that it went over my head. Other stuff didn't. I'll just enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's valid. Can I just say, the scene in when Kryten goes to meet Rimmer outside Starbug, thank goodness they had a bit of a bigger budget, because that whole scene looked a lot better than in, I think, the first episode of Series 3, when they did a shot like that, where, you get classic CSO blue screen fringing. In that episode, it's like, ooh, like, there it is in Series 3. Whereas now, it looks a lot cleaner. It might have been a new, like, computer doing it, whatever. Because in Series 3, Episode 1, you had that ejector shot as well, where they just used, like, was it an action figure or a dummy?
I think it was
against
just
the blue screen, and you just thought,
figure.
Me and Phil, when we were both like, yeah, that's a shot, but it was.
Well, the thing to also keep in mind is these effects looked better at the time because they weren't broadcast in high definition. They were watched on tiny standard definition TVs, which are really forgiving. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I've watched later in life, that I already knew on Blu-ray or DVD and gone, oh God, my memory of that effect is way better than that. And at least part of that, part of it's, nostalgia goggles, but at least part of that is also, I'm used to seeing it on a screen that is blurry enough to forgive a lot of sins.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually. The old CRT TVs and just the sheer size of them, because they were quite small. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that before. You kind of give it a little bit of leeway because the technology wasn't there then for filming it and stuff. But also, yeah, it would have been more forgiving.
Yeah. The technology wasn't there, but it also didn't need to be because people weren't watching it in the kind of definition that we are now rewatching it in.
Yeah. And also, I mean, one thing it has been great in, though, Red Dwarf so far, is that all the model work, like all the Starbug stuff is great. You know, it's that high standard of that I guess the BBC did so well with their models. Like, you know, we see it in Classic Who and other things of the time. So yeah, anytime like Starbug's on, like flying around, it just looks really good. Although Phil tells me later on, this is like way down the line, we're going to get into mid-90s CG territory,
more
and that kind
late
of scares
90s,
me.
early, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of scares me a bit because we all know what that's like. So
eventually, yes. I mean, again, it was a budgetary thing. The models look great, but the models are more expensive.
Yeah.
But I do like that every now and then you actually get behind-the-scenes stories of how the model work actually affected the story. So, like, one of my favorite episodes is from Series 3. It's Marooned. And, like, part of the initial starting premise of that was the writers asking the effects team, what can you guys do really well? And they're like, we can do snow really well. And that was part of why that episode even happened.
Oh, that's
Oh,
ace.
wow. I didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, go with your strengths. If you've got a model team that can do some really good stuff.
I mean, that's the heart of working within a small budget. It's not trying to create something that it's more than you can do. It's figure out, what do we do well? Let's work around that rather than stretch this thin.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're on Starbuck, and it's Rimmer and Lister. They pick up a distress signal, and in typical Rimmer style, he doesn't want to, the planet's going to explode. He doesn't want to risk his own life. He's quite happy to leave them there. But Kryten insists on going and finding who sent the distress signal. So and he finds Camille.
He does. Yeah. That was surprising at first because obviously we're seeing a female version of that android, and I was like, oh, this is quirky, kind of cool. It gave me one of my favorite lines of this episode, which is a contender for my funniest, where they're doing like the little flirty talk, like that awkward androidy flirty talk. And what does he say? I wrote it down. It was like, Kryten says, oh, the way the light captures the angles in your head. I was like, that's just, it caught me off guard. And I just thought, like, because it's such an odd thing to say, but I guess that's one of the prevailing factors about it. Because one thing I'd said to Phil, Nathaniel, before he started this, Phil was like, do you know anything about Red Dwarf? And I was like, well, I've seen some pictures, and is it the one with that guy with the angled head? So I guess maybe that's what it is as well, because that's one of my earliest like associations with this program. So yeah, I don't know, that line just really made me chuckle.
One of my
because it's so
favorite lines is also from that same scene, but it's the stuff about the WD-40 fragrance.
Yes.
Oh, what is that fragrance? It smells divine.
WD-40.
Me and Nathaniel have seen it before. We knew what was coming. What did you think at this point? What did you think the plot line was going to be?
At this point, I thought, okay, so he's gonna take Camille back to the ship, and they're maybe gonna have this little romance thing, but then circumstances will mean that it will end in a tragedy, as much as Red Dwarf will do it with a the flair of comedy. But no, I wasn't expecting what we did get. But I guess it sort of worked out that way. There is still sort of that romance, and
the same basic beats are there.
Same basic beats are there,
described, isn't it?
But I didn't
expect... just an added complication of everyone else seeing them as their perfect woman.
Exactly. Yeah. As it gets on, I'm imagining what that must have been like shooting it. Like getting it right. This actor in, now this actor in, right now this actor in. But yeah, no, it was cool.
I gotta tell you, it was really. This was a. I'm legitimately curious as to whether this was the random luck of the draw that I landed on this one.
It was.
Well, okay, then that's kind of fascinating because this was an interesting one for me to go and rewatch. So, okay, for context, in case listeners don't know this about me, I am gender fluid. My personal sense of gender, it varies. My pronouns are she, they. I'm on low dose hormones. So like I've gone through in the last decade or so, sort of a gradual sort of finding the most comfortable place where I am with my gender. And so watching an episode like this, where someone's presentation changes based off who they're interacting with, and they feel that they cannot safely reveal who they actually are, it hit me on completely different levels than it ever would have watching it when I would have seen it originally.
Yeah, I bet. I'm completely different levels than it would have affected me and Adam, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, and I always am quick to point this out whenever I do what is effectively a queer reading on a show like this. I don't believe that any of the stuff that I have or will probably be pointing out is intentional or deliberate, or that anyone else is required to read it that way. It's just my life experiences give me this read on it, which it's especially interesting to go back and watch pieces of entertainment that I had watched previously before coming to a better understanding of myself, and sort of seeing them with a whole new set of life experience.
And do you think this would, taking that kind of reading on it, would you say it was a positive one?
Well, I mean, especially considering that I don't believe it was meant as one. I said that it's an interestingly nuanced one to do this kind of read on, because it's very much, it has a surprising amount to say in terms of presenting yourself in a way that makes other people comfortable, which anyone who has ever been any degree of closeted has had to deal with the idea of, well, I want other people to like me, and they won't like this about me. How can I present myself in a way that will make me more accepted? Now, this is obviously a sci-fi, ridiculous, fantastical extrapolation of that, but it is kind of a similar core mentality where you edit who you are in order to present as either safely or as comfortably or as appealingly to the other person as you can. Sort of separate from that read, though, I also find it very interesting, and I don't know if it speaks to the writer's views on love in general. I do find it very interesting that each of these guys' ideal mate is very close to themselves, or in the case of the cat, literally themselves. But like, that's the extreme. But all three of them, it's someone who is very, very much like themselves.
Yeah, I suppose that in a way that also speaks to society in general. We people do have this. I don't know how exactly to phrase it, but often we feel like we're pressured to fit in with the people around us, even on a just a sort of your friends from school type way. You might pretend, or not pretend, probably the wrong word, but you might be more enthusiastic about a sports team than you would have done had those friends not been into them. You sort of adapt to the environment you find yourself in order to fit in more.
Yeah. With these friends, I'll talk about sports. With these friends, I'll talk about Star Wars, and never the twain shall meet.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, exactly. No, I exact same. Growing up in South Yorkshire, which is I think still a typically, I don't know what you'd say, like a very, I guess, masculine orientated town, if you like. At school that the boys were like boys, for want of a better word, and you had to be seen to be, like really tough, show no emotion. Do you know what I mean? That sort of like school vibe. And I was never like that. I was weird. Like, I was extravagant. I was different. And as you do, I think when you're younger, you quit. Well, there's that pressure, like you were saying about, oh, I have to not be like, I've got to assimilate my behavior so that these people interact with me, that they engage with me. As you get older, you shed that. And sadly, I think the ones who are truly your friends or respect you will come along with you. And then but it does also weed out those people who aren't like that. And it's never nice being told by someone, I don't like the way you are, no matter what it might be. So yeah, no, that what you were saying, Nathaniel, about that sense of thinking I can't present myself how I feel the most comfortable for the sake of X, Y, or Z. I absolutely agree with you on that read. I think that's a perfectly valid read.
Now it's interesting with the characters with what you just mentioned about sort of being more yourself, sort of finding out who the people who truly accept you are, because within this episode, the ones who sort of turn the harshest on Camille are the most superficial ones, and that's Rimmer and the cat. The cat just flat out saying heartbreaker, and Rimmer basically disappearing from the story once he no longer has an attraction to this thing. Lister fades into the background a little, but Lister is very understanding about the position Camille is in, and Kryten is obviously completely accepting. So it's like a gradient of who is the most accepting of the truth of Camille.
So Camille appears to everyone as their ideal partner. As a hologram to Rimmer, who apparently looks like his sister-in-law, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, can we talk about how slightly creepy that is?
Well, it's sort of a recurring thing that he's always envious of his brothers, isn't he? So this kind of ties into that.
It fits, and I'm like, things being vaguely creepy about Rimmer fits anyways, but like that was a detail I've forgotten. And like, let me be clear, like, I understand there's no blood relation, but like, ideally your brain would go, okay, that's not an option, so don't go there. And his never did that bit of filtering.
Yeah. It's it's like you're saying, like awkward or very weird things with Rimmer is quite normal, because I think, was it in the last episode, Phil, where he makes a comment about, what was his uncle called? Was it Uncle Frank?
Oh, Frank, Uncle Frank.
There's a whole joke set up where he's on about, he would, like, Uncle Frank was looking for his mum's room and he ended up in his room, and like
he's talking about a camping trip, isn't he? When
it's a camping
the
trip.
The lead up seems to imply, which is wrong on its own merit, that he had some hot cousins who he thought fancied him, and then he was suddenly found himself being kissed in the middle of the night, woken up being kissed, and it turned out to be Uncle Frank. So there are many things wrong with that.
Well, Uncle Frank thought he'd found Rimmer's mum's tent, so just keep adding layers onto this.
That's what we'll go with. Yeah.
Deprived layers on deprived layers in the Rimmer household.
Yeah.
So he's got the hologram, and then Lister has someone that dressed very much like them. Now, interesting, I read again IMDb, so take with a grain of salt, but apparently this was. They'd originally considered making Rimmer's person that he saw Kachansky, and then decided that it would mean that Rimmer would clock on what was going on too quickly, because why would Kachansky be there? Even though that is his ideal woman in his head. So instead, they kind of went for sort of similar to the sort of parallel universe version of him.
I was going to say, it's almost Mark II of female Lister.
Yeah, it's almost Debbie Lister again, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite bit of that whole interaction is when, you know, that he's insinuating that they've got to repopulate, and there's all that banter back and forth, and then it's when he says, "Oh, now let me go and get me Spider-Man costume." I don't know why. Again, that just really tickled me, because the thought of Craig Charles in a Spider-Man outfit trying to be like very flirtatious.
That's what he rocks up to the bedroom in.
Hey, I mean, I'm sure he could do it. I'm not trying to cast doubt, but I don't know, the image just really made me laugh. So yeah,
that whole scene, I was starting to like, because when it started, I was like, oh, okay, is it going there? He's imitating being a doctor, but actually, it was quite. They played it quite well, I think, and it was quite obvious straight away that he wasn't like trying to actually seriously make out that he was Doctor. Like, she knew straight away, he knew she knew it, so it didn't feel like it was pushing against a horrible boundary or anything, because both people knew what was going on.
It's the easy way to sort of get around those situations, is to have the other person like know immediately. Like, this came up when I guy a couple years ago, and I had a conversation about the original Ghostbusters, which is my favorite movie of all time. And like Venkman, which is Bill Murray's character, is a skis, and like that is established early on. But part of why his relationship with Dana works is she doesn't fall for like any of his nonsense right from the get-go. She sees right through all of his crap. I'm like, okay, I don't feel like she's in danger from him because she knows she has him completely pegged. And I kind of get that similar vibe here.
The interestingly, the people that play these characters, the one playing the original android Camille is played by Robert Llewellyn's then girlfriend, now wife, and the one playing Lister's the one Lister sees was his at the time girlfriend.
Wow. That explains why the
I don't know why they didn't get Chris Barry's then girlfriend. Maybe didn't have one at the time, or
maybe she wasn't an actor. There's that possibility.
Yeah, there's that too as well. Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
How dare these actors not date other actors? What's going on there?
Seriously, how are we supposed to come up with cute shipping names? I did know that, and like that's honestly, it's an easy way to get instant chemistry. Between two, if you can get it. One of the things I find interesting from a narrative perspective about this scene where Lister encounters Camille is Rimmer comes in and starts talking to her, and then a couple of things happen in rapid succession, one of which I just think is a neat twist, and then another thing that narratively I just appreciate. The sort of neat twist is that we find out not only does Camille look different, they hear different things when she speaks.
Yeah.
Because, Rimmer is going on about, I'm going to show her my collection of pictures of telegraph poles. And Lister's like, you like telegraph poles? And she's like, no, they're terrible. And Rimmer just hears affirmations. So Camille's whole deal like goes beyond just the visuals, which I thought was interesting. But what I mainly appreciated narratively is that we're about at the halfway mark of the episode and Lister figures out what's going on. That this isn't dragged out as a comedy of errors and there's misunderstandings, and like, because that's the kind of thing I would have gotten bored with very quickly. I have a low tolerance for comedy of misunderstandings, so I appreciated that one of the characters figured out what was going on at pretty much the earliest point that somebody reasonably could have figured out what was going on. So no one's being made to look stupid, and it's like, no, let's actually go into a more interesting place now that the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking of the cats, nice segue.
Very good.
The cat finds out about Camille from Lister after Lister already knows what's going on. So he's got the lowdown. He knows it's going to be the object of his desire and is very keen to find out what that is. And then, as we mentioned earlier, it's him.
Of course.
He is the object of his own desire.
Is there anyone more deserving?
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah. I love the way he comes out after, and Lister's trying to find out what happened to what he saw, and he's just making all this like, yeah. I can't remember what the exact lines are now, but they, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because when he says, "Oh, I'm going in," I was like, "Oh, I wonder what he's gonna see." And then as soon as you realise it's Cat, I was like, "It's that thing of you go, who else could it have been?" Like, honestly, who else?
It's not
was
what
it
you
gonna
would
be?
think of, but what you see is like it could never have been anything else.
Yeah, and even says like, "Oh, it's our vanity," and they're like, "Yeah." It's like that is. Oh, the beauty of Cat.
That's one of my favorite shots in the whole show is Cat high-fiving himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually it didn't look too bad as well for, a bit of split screen. They obviously framed it very well. Yeah. It looked good. So the caddy's out of the bag, as we've said. Everyone finds out about it, and the true visage of Camille is revealed, and it's a huge green blob.
Yeah. And I wrote in my notes, and I know this was probably intentional on the production team, but I put, wow, that's a BBC monster if I ever saw one. Like, in the nicest possible... Again, it was probably intentional, but it reminded me, and I'm sorry for any listeners, because this might be quite a deep cut. In the Doctor Who story, Delta and the Bannermen, in the ticket bit with Ken Dodd, I swear there's a bit where a human looking person is going through a booth and then it triggers something and he reverts to his alien form. And it basically looked like, it's not the same prop, but it basically looks like that. So it's, it made me smile. I liked how adorably blobby it was.
Yeah,
I suppose,
it's not like sometimes the show tries to get ambitious. Like the polymorph was an ambitious attempt at a creature. Like this is not. Like this is ridiculous, and we know it is, and we don't care because for the purposes of the rest of this episode, it being ridiculous probably works better.
Oh, and it does, absolutely. Like the whole montage we get of like it and Kryten just doing the romantic
seeing that
things.
Thing
like
disco
I was
dance
howling throughout all that.
See, this is the point where I thought this is where I guessed what was going to happen, and it didn't. It went in a different direction because I thought when Kryten was, made his thing at that point when it gets revealed and he goes, "Oh, I think you're cute," and asks her out on a date. That was where I was thinking, "Oh, this is him lying for noble reasons." He's found out something like, because I couldn't remember how it ended, so I thought, oh, has he found out something like that's going to mean she has to go away, and therefore he's going to make, or she's dying or something like that, and it's going to make that week the best week of her life, even though he doesn't really think that. So that's what, and I was completely wrong, but that's where in my head I thought it was going with the themes of the episode at that point.
And like, and that would have made sense. Can I say how happy I am that they didn't do that? Because like, there's just a, with that whole idea, and I'm not judging you for thinking that was where they were going, but for like that whole idea, there's just this real skeeviness of just toying with someone's emotions, quote unquote, for their own good. Whereas, yes, he does lie for her emotions, but it is not a lie he is going to have to maintain over a long period, messing with her the entire road. And like, there was part of me that actually wondered, like, does knowing the lying lessons, like, does it bring doubt on that montage, on that affection? And I think by the end, it's very clear that no, he was actually feeling that affection for her, and that's why what he did at the end and saying you should go, why that was the lie, and that gets underlined very firmly. I'm like, okay, that's the way to balance this, so it's clear he's not just messing with her.
Yeah, and I'm so glad they didn't go that route. I think I've just been sort of trained by other media to think that that's the obvious storyline that they would go down, and I'm really glad that they didn't, because it's just a really nice, sweet story for the two of them at the end there with the montage and everything. It's lovely, and
it is. I do feel that the ending, like after the montage, the ending does feel very rushed to me, because basically once it gets into the Casablanca homage, it shifts into that really suddenly. And I think they just kind of figured, well, since everyone's going to recognize it as an homage, we'll get away with it. Like, as far as what the story is, it works, but like, it's really quick, because like, out of nowhere, we just hear someone's here to see Camille, and suddenly Kryten's turning to her and go, "You have a husband?" I'm like, wait, what? So like, it just rushes those last it rushes basically the last 20 minutes of Casablanca into its last 2 minutes of runtime, and you kind of feel the breakneck pace of that a little bit.
Yeah, it did also, that's reminded me that it made me slightly go, hold on, why? That's a bit of a jump to a conclusion there, that husband thing, because he's like, somebody's here to see her. You've got a husband? It's like,
it is, but
you made that leap
but they
very
don't
quickly.
have time for him not to make the leap, because they've only got so many minutes left in the
True.
episode, and like that's the thing. I understand they couldn't make the episode longer, but yeah, it is a sprint to the finish.
We've said that quite a lot. We've noticed watching this show from the beginning and back to back that they do that a lot. They will get through most of the plot, and then suddenly it'll all wrap up really quickly in the last couple of, like, sometimes even the last like 2 minutes. Like it won't feel like it's come into the third act yet, and yet suddenly everything suddenly wrapped up in like the space of a few minutes.
I mean, there are some times that, like thinking back to one of my favorite episodes, which is the one where Lister takes the chef's exam. That one almost feels like a non-ending because it like ends in a freeze frame on the conclusion of him saying he passed the test, and then the next episode opens with actually he failed and there will be no consequences to this whatsoever.
Yes.
The show right from the beginning did endings of episodes weird sometimes.
Yeah. The continuity of these shows just... Phil did warn me early on. He was like, you've got to understand, like, some things will just never be continued. You'll never hear about it again. And then some things that you think, oh, maybe they won't touch on that, get, like, random references, like, seasons down the line. You know, it's
I mean, like, that's one of the things that I really admire about the opening to Series 3 is the sped up crawl that explains why the continuity is all screwed up, but they zip it by so fast that you can't possibly read it, basically hammering home the fact, stop caring about the continuity because we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that apparently everything in that crawl was meant to be an episode, and they started writing it. And then they just realized it wasn't very funny as an episode, so they just was like,
yeah, if the only reason you're doing it is to maintain continuity and you wouldn't do it otherwise, you know what? I'm glad they went with what they did.
The only other thing I had in my notes is I just put Casablanca parody at the end, which we've already mentioned. Nice little reference back. It had been mentioned throughout the episode. I quite, nice to bring that back.
The only other thing I had, and this is such a small thing, and people go, "Oh my god, why are you focusing on this?" But in the end credits, I cannot stand the new font they're using for the credits. I don't know what it is. It's so very gaudy early 90s, which is when this first came out, but it feels like more chat show credits rather than red, which is odd though, because at the start of the episode, they used the Red Dwarf font, the font they had, saying written by the two creators. It was the same font. And then in this one, it's all like, bright purple lines and chat show style. I don't know. I know it's a really minor thing, but the credits came up and I was like, whoa, like, what is this?
I mean, look, if you want to be nitpicky, and I'm pretty sure they do it throughout the series. I can't remember if they did it in Series 3 too. I hate the way they do the titles of the episodes in these big block red letters scrolling horizontally across in front of the actors' faces. I hate that. I mean, it's over so quick.
I think for Series 3...
It's over so quick you never remember. I literally forgot until you mentioned that, and then it made me think of this other thing. But, like, in the 2 seconds it takes to happen, I hate it.
For Series 3, I don't think they scrolled. I think the same text came up, same red blocky text, but I think it was static in Series 3, and in this series they've started having it across the screen.
But I know what you mean, though. But, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just... Because they're still using the same backdrop for the credits as well, like the panning shot over the top of the ship, and it just doesn't. To my eyes anyway, it just doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. It looks very mismatched. But I'm just gonna have to get over that because it's gonna be the rest. It's gonna be for the rest of Series 4 at least, so maybe more.
Just wait, Adam, until we get onto the season with the opening credits with the bars at the top and the bottom. There's that's generally. Not liked, I believe. Anyway, any other points that anybody wanted to raise?
I think I hit all the main stuff that I wanted to. I mean, like I said, coming back, realizing this was the episode we were going to do, I was kind of nervous, like knowing that I had a new life experience and a new perspective to bring to this one that was going to be applicable to what it was doing, and I always get nervous. Knowing that going into things like, oh God, is the perspective I now have going to ruin this? And it didn't, which is always a massive relief. But I also think usually speaks to really well-constructed writing that it can hold up to the scrutiny of a completely different perspective that I have now 10 or however many years it's been since I watched it last.
Well, I'm certainly glad that, it just by the luck of the draw we did get you for this episode then, because it's really good to have that other perspective on it. And it's just random luck of the draw. What dates are you available? Oh, we're up to that episode on that day. There we go. So what about favourite characters in the episode? We usually pick one character each that, has been our favourite throughout that episode. It can be that they were the funniest, but it can be for other reasons as well. It can just be that they had a single line you really liked, or you really connected with their story, or any particular reason. But do you have a favorite character out of this episode?
I think overall this is a really good showcase for Kryten, who, if I'm going to be completely honest, is probably normally my least favorite out of the core four. Not that I dislike him, but I like him the least often out of the four of them. But this is an episode that does a really good job of utilizing him well, of having his usual quirks, but having them feed into the story instead of interrupt the story with his sort of stuff. And I like just having the whole arc be this him learning to lie, and him also, experiencing these emotions. I think it was surprisingly well done, and there are moments that he gets quite tender towards Camille, or even talking after the fact with Lister, that I really appreciated. And also, I just kind of love the face that he makes when he tries to go, "You smell."
What about you, Adam?
I can't speak today. Mine's the same as well, Kryten, because it's funny because the last episode we watched, which was the conclusion of series 3, was also a very Kryten-focused episode. It was I can't remember the title, Phil, but it's the one where Kryten, there's a replacement android on the way, and it's like Kryten's last night, so to speak. It's called The Last Day, I think.
Last Day,
or Last Night, yeah. And that was very Kryten-focused. And like you said, they knew how to use the character, and Robert Llewellyn did it fantastically. And he just does it. He does pretty much the same in this one, but to a different angle. I find this with characters who are meant to be like robots, or like devoid of, I guess, like real emotions, for example. But then they can make you feel emotions yourself. Like the one I always parallel as one of my favorite films, which is Terminator 2. Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing a emotionless robot. Yeah, exactly. The thumbs up. Yeah, he has some of the most emotional scenes in the whole movie. And it's like, how is this emotionless robot making me feel? And it was kind of same, towards the end when he says goodbye to the blob, or the pleasure gelt, I should say. It just, obviously before the Casablanca references came in, but Robert Llewellyn sells it, because I think as an actor, what's your brief? It's a robot who doesn't really have that much emotion and has like this. It's really hard to play that, I think, sometimes, but he's constantly finding new facets of it that I really enjoy. So yeah,
one of the elements of Kryten that I actually appreciate as far as depictions of robots go, because if you haven't seen the video, there's a really excellent discussion about the tropes of robots on a series called Trope Talks on Overly Sarcastic Productions. And she spends a significant amount of time talking about a lot of the problems with the quote-unquote emotionless robot, because oftentimes they are coded in a way that is very similar to a lot of neurodivergent people or people on the autism spectrum, and sort of implying that a lack of emotions makes you robotic actually can be really problematic. But through that lens, one of the things I really appreciate about Kryten is he's actually really never depicted as being devoid of emotions, but he is depicted as being not very good at handling them when he feels them, and sort of which ones have more emphasis is maybe not what would be normal for at least the other human characters he's encountering. Because like you can just see with how fidgety he gets that he's obviously feeling things, but he's really bad at managing that. And I do appreciate that as a little bit different from sort of the Data from Star Trek thing, which is just a total lack of them and like barely able to understand them. And like Kryten isn't always good at understanding his own, but he's still definitely feeling stuff.
Yeah, well, back in the polymorph episode, it was what the polymorph took from him was his guilt.
That's right.
And so he, it kind of just makes you think that, is he walking around perpetually feeling guilty 90% of the time? Is that like what his waking day is like? Every time he does something slightly wrong or doesn't fulfill his programmed purpose perfectly, he feels really guilty about it. He feels responsible
for everything. So anytime anything goes wrong, he accepts the guilt for that, whether he was involved or not.
Yeah, I'd have to say Kryten also, it's got to be for this episode. And that does mean picking him 2 episodes in a row, because they've both been very heavily Kryten-focused episodes. So, for many of the same reasons, Kryten would be my favorite as well. What about funniest moment? What do you think was your funniest moment?
I mean, for me, it was the reveal of the cat with himself. I just love that interaction. And I also love that they don't drag it out. He goes in, we get like 3 lines back and forth, and then they're out of the scene. Like, that scene could have very easily been dragged out to death, but they were in, the punchline was made, and we get out of it. I'm like, that was perfectly comedically timed and executed and balanced, and I love it.
No, that was a contender of mine, but I think just based on like pure guttural reaction that I had, I've got to give it to that one line about, oh, like the light really favors the angles in your head. And I know that sounds really daft, but it just tickled me. And even afterwards, after I finished the episode, I kept thinking of that line.
When you're
just,
allowed,
like, giggling to myself.
When you're allowed to go out to the pub again, try using that line. I bet you pull something.
You know what? I'll take you up on that. I'll let you know.
Like, don't take advice from me. I'm someone who's been in a relationship for 5 years. I do not take dating advice for me.
Well, I'll pass it on to one of my single friends who's looking for a date when lockdown ends. Hopefully soon. I'll be like, yeah, just say this, mate. This will work. Like this. I'll be like, really? I'll be like, yeah, give it a try. So yeah, but that's mine anyway. That's I think mine. What about you, Phil?
Mine would be that whole scene just after. No, I'm getting the names muddled up now. Not Lister. Rimmer has first seen Camille, and it's Kryten and Rimmer in the cockpit. And it's just that moment where they're both talking about the same person, but are like cross wires because they both think they're talking about a different person, basically. And the particular line I particularly liked was when Rimmer is comparing, as we mentioned earlier, Camille to his sister-in-law and saying how attractive she is. And Kryten goes something along the lines of, "What happened? Was she in an accident?" Because of the angled head and everything.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's talking about his sister-in-law as a human. Why would she have that head? That line cracked me up. I like that one. That was good. What about marks? We usually give him marks out of 10. How many scutters out of 10 would you give this episode?
I guess I'll go first. I'd probably give it 8. Like, realize I'm stingy. Like, the whatever the scale is, the number of things that I will give full marks to, it's very, very few. But like, I consider this a really good solid 8. It knows what it's doing. It knows what it wants to be. It's a really good Kryten, a really good showcase for Kryten. Who, like, in hindsight, is a character who does well when he's the focus. I just don't like him as a support as much, I think might be the thing. But it's just really well done.
Yeah. I think the highest thing we've given anything so far is 9.5. We haven't given anything 10 yet. So we're not we're a little bit stingy ourselves. One day we may get a 10. What about you, Adam?
I think I gave this to the last episode, and I'm going to give this a 9. I did really, really enjoy this one. It's one that I think what I've been saying throughout this podcast is the ones I rate the highest are the ones where I'm thinking, like, further down the line, out of all the Red Dwarf episodes that we're going to watch in this show, which are the ones that stand out to me immediately? And this is definitely one of those. The whole beats of the story, some of the jokes, it's just the same with, like I had with Polymorph, like with The Last Day, it's just going to stand out. So yeah, for that reason and everything good that we've talked about in it, it's getting a 9 from me.
Yeah, I feel a little bit stingy as well here because I've put 8 down on my notes, but I can't think of anything that I'm marking it down for particularly. But I just kind of like I think there's like I need to leave space for the really, really amazing ones that I know are coming. So yeah, I'm gonna go with 8. It was a solid episode. I really enjoyed it. There was some funny laugh out loud moments and. Yeah, some good stuff from Kryten. So, 8 from me.
There we go.
Very
good.
Well, there we go. That's another episode down on this journey through Red Dwarf. We'll be back again next week. Thank you for joining us, Nathanial.
Happy to do it.
And do promote where people can find you on the internet and what kind of things you get up to.
Oh God. Okay, I'll try and keep this quick because there's a lot. So Council of Geeks is where you will find the majority of the stuff that I spend the most time doing. On YouTube, that's where you'll find my more detailed and more planned and my higher end video work. There's also the subsidiary channel Break Room of Geeks, which is less structured and usually just me talk about whatever the heck I've watched lately that I just have some things to say about. I'm on Patreon, which is what actually pays the bills. This is my living. Weird. I know. I don't understand either. But it also kind of serves as a central hub because everything else I do pretty much gets posted there. It got mentioned already. There's the What the Frel podcast, which is on the Council of Geeks podcast feed, which I do with Jesse Gender, watching Farscape, going through every episode of that. We are in season 3 of that right now. You can also find Council of Geeks on Twitter and Instagram. And since I mentioned being gender fluid, if you have more interest in that end of my life, you can look up Vera Wild spelled W-Y-L-D-E, all pretentious like. And you can find that on YouTube and Twitter and TikTok, which if I don't mention that, Jesse will throw something at me, I'm sure. And the last thing, because like I said, I've got way too much. I have a book that is now available for purchase on Amazon. I wrote a fantasy novel called Dreams of Fire, available as an ebook, as a paperback, and also as a hardcover. So you've got options as far as that goes.
Lots of stuff there,
Awesome.
Including being down with the kids on TikTok. I am not that. I'm not that cool. I'm not on TikTok.
I'm doing frighteningly well on TikTok, and I do not understand why.
Just roll with it. Keep rolling with it. So...
I've only dabbled in, I've opened the TikTok app twice. That's how old I am.
I'm pretty sure I'm older than you are.
Yeah, but I don't think you're much older than me. Maybe a few years. We'll compare ages later.
It doesn't need to be on the record.
Adam, where can people find
Yes.
you? Where are the usual places people can find you?
Usual places. Well, on YouTube, just Adam Martyn with a Y. If you type in I, you'll get someone completely different. But yeah, type in Martyn with a Y. I should pop up there. I talk about Doctor Who, other pop culture stuff, just things I'm interested in, really. I just talk about whatever I'm interested in. And on Twitter, Adam Martyn AMTV, if you want to keep up with my daily rabblings, which change on a daily basis. 1 minute I could be like, oh, look at this new thing. And then I could just be sharing an outdated meme or something like that. So yeah, Twitter and YouTube is the one for me. But Phil, what about you? Where can the people find you?
Before you said that, I was going to add in an extra plug for you to say, check out AMTV Radio, because of course, if you want to hear more of Adam and Nathaniel talking to each other, there is an episode there of AMTV Radio on Adam's channel.
There is.
When Nathaniel was the guest on that, so go check out that as well. Yeah, you can find me, usual place. You might be watching this on YouTube. I say watching. Again, squiggly line going across the screen while we speak. On YouTube, on my YouTube channel, Philip Hawkins. But if you're not, that's where it's just my name. And on Twitter, I am still, despite constantly threatening to change it because nobody knows how to spell it, so I'm going to spell it out for you. IUDEX_Phil on Twitter, which is not Ludex because it's an I. It's not IUDEX. It's pronounced Udex. It's a silent I. It's stupidly pretentious, and I keep meaning to change it, but never get around to it. So that's where you can find me. But there we go. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
See ya.
See you later.